Welcome back with a smiling face. Important note before starting, if you are a fan of audio stories, then our Patreon account is the best platform for you. Join us on Patreon for the best audiobooks ever. Coming Together Book 3. Episode 12. Chapter 19 to 28 of Book 3. Antone tried to calm me down after that, to convince me Nast's threat was empty. But that threat was the last thing on my mind. I was freaked out about what I'd just done, that rage-blind attack on Nast. Was it a sign that I was reverting? Of course Nast would say that another reason for me to need his cabal. I couldn't put too much stock in his diagnosis. My real worry was the guys. For now, I had to trust Ash was long gone, out of danger. I had to trust Daniel could look after himself. I had to believe he was fine, just battered and bruised and holed up somewhere with Corey. The alternative? I couldn't even think of the alternative. When Antone finally left, I didn't really notice. The next thing I knew, I was being bowled over by a furry cannonball. I looked up to see a German shepherd looming over me. Kenji. I hugged her so tight she wriggled until I let go, then she bathed my face with her tongue, shoving me back on the bed every time I tried to get up. Finally I pushed her away, laughing. "Now that's a sound I like to hear," said a voice. "I just hope I get the same reception as the dog." I looked up to see a guy my age, with straight dark hair down to his collar, amber eyes dancing with a grin that turned an ordinary face gorgeous. Nast had said they had 2 other skinwalkers in custody, but I'd been too shocked over Daniel to process what that meant. I launched myself at Rafe. He caught me and hugged me as tightly as I'd hugged Kenji. "You okay?" he whispered as he let me go. I thought of Daniel and could only nod, gaze dropping. He lifted my chin and I knew he was going to kiss me, but I backed off, still holding his hands, struggling to smile. "Maya." Rafe stepped toward me. I retreated to the bed and collapsed there. Kenji lay down with her head on my lap. Rafe reached to move the papers on the bed aside. Then he saw what they were. The photos. He leafed through them, once quickly, then slower, before he sucked in breath and swore. "That's..." I nodded. "He was." I nodded again. "When?" "Yesterday." "Is he okay?" "I don't know," I said. "They haven't found him." Rafe sat on the edge of the bed with me. Rafe set the photos aside, face down. "They're lying. They doctored photos to spook you." "I don't think so." "Well, I do." He straightened. "I'm sure of it." I shook my head. "We were separated. Daniel didn't meet up with us. The only reason he'd do that is if he couldn't. Temporarily. He'd have found you as soon as he could." Rafe drew my gaze up to the vent. A microphone or camera, I was guessing. Rafe was warning me not to say anything that could lead them to Daniel. I nodded and leaned against his shoulder. He put his arm around me. "Daniel's fine. You know he is." I nodded, closed my eyes, and tried to believe it. When I felt a little better, I looked around. I'd known I was in a bedroom. Now I noticed the double bed, closet, desk, and dresser. It looked I fought back a chill. It looked like my room. Not exactly, there were no photos or mementos. The furniture was different. But it was the same kind of pieces in the same configuration. I hadn't recognized it because the most important part of my bedroom had not been duplicated. I had huge windows along 2 walls that opened onto the wraparound second-story balcony. Mom's design, one that let me feel like I was outdoors even when I wasn't. There was, to my surprise, a window here. Just a normal-sized one. It looked out onto what seemed like an empty blue sky, but when I walked over to it, I could see the glass was opaque. It let in light, but wouldn't let me look out. I wrapped the pane. Shatterproof, Rafe said. Believe me, I've tried. Broke my desk chair throwing it at mine. What did they do? Gave me a stern talking to about damaging property, while letting me know that they understood the urge to act out. He rolled his eyes. It's like being in a group home. No one ever gets mad about anything. They take away privileges, but they don't get angry, they just want to talk about it. They don't want us feeling like we're in a prison. Sometimes I'd prefer a prison. This is just creepy. He walked over to stand beside me at the window. They say that when we accept the situation, they'll replace these with glass we can actually see through. Really? And they'll make them breakable, too. He laughed and put his arm around my waist. Not a chance. But we will get field trips. To the mall and stuff. Because I know you love going to the mall. I shuddered. He laughed again and pulled me against him, our hips bumping, his fingers warm, his smell washing over me, a familiar musky scent, skinwalker scent. I relaxed a little, then stiffened. Field trips? So we're stuck indoors. All the time. He rubbed down the goosebumps rising on my arm. There's a yard. With a 12-foot wood fence and guards with tranq guns. There's a rooftop exercise area, too. More walls that we can't see past or climb over. Like a big kiddie playground, with huge balls of yarn and wind-up mice to chase. I stared at him. I'm kidding. Kind of. They have a boxing ring and weights for the Benandanti and balance beams and hurdles for us. It sounds awful, and I've been really tempted to ignore it, but the fresh air and the exercise. He shrugged. It helps keep me from going nuts while I figure out a way. He glanced at the vent and didn't finish. Any luck with that? I murmured. Not really. Scoping the situation for now. So we're in a lab? A compound of some sort. He shook his head. A house. Huge mansion of a place. It doesn't smell like city, so I think we're outside Vancouver. They're still working on the house, but it was pretty much ready to go when we arrived, which makes me think the St. Clouds had been working on it for a while. A contingency plan in case we decided we didn't want to stay in Salmon Creek after we found out about the experiments. The Nasts must have bought it along with us. The lab rats and their habitat. Yet. So for now I'm just taking stock and a rap at the door. I waited for someone to enter, but Rafe had to call a come in before it opened. He rolled his eyes at me. In walked a woman I'd known for almost my entire life. Dr. Inglis. Head of the lab in Salmon Creek. She'd been in charge of our medical care since I moved there. She hadn't always been our personal doctor, but she'd been a fixture in town and in our lives. Last time she'd seen me, I'd been in cat form pinning her to the ground. When she stepped in, her gaze went straight to me, and she started to smile. She caught herself and turned to Rafe instead. Is it time? He asked. Yes. It went well. She nodded. Again she looked at me. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something. Whatever it was, she just murmured it under her breath, gaze dropping, and withdrew. What's she doing here? I asked. The Nasts hired her, Rafe said. Seems she wanted to stay and help us. Which I've suggested she could do a lot better by opening a door and letting us out. But apparently, that's not the plan. He shook his head. Enough of that. There's someone I want you to meet. He walked to the door and turned the knob. I expected a security escort on the other side. The hall was empty. I peered out. Yeah, we pretty much have the run of the place. Not much damage we can do. Shatterproof glass. Cameras everywhere. Only 2 exits, both with alarms and guarded by multiple guys with tranq guns. Patrolling guards, too, both on foot and in cars. He really had done his research. Not that I expected any less. I started to step out, Kenji at my heels, but Rafe waved her back. Better leave her here, he said. She doesn't like some of our jailers, not surprisingly. They've threatened to kennel her. I nodded and urged her back inside. She obeyed with a sigh, as if she was expecting it. As he closed my bedroom door, I said, "So that wasn't locked?" He shook his head. "They never are. This isn't a jail, kiddies. Any security is for your own good. We all care about you. We all want you to be comfortable. We know you won't be happy yet, but that is our goal, someday." I made gagging noises. He grinned. "Exactly. Prepare to be treated like a rebellious 12-year-old. There were stairs right outside my door. Behind us, the hall stretched for at least 20 meters, flanked by a half-dozen doors. My room's the third down from yours. Just in case you were interested. Did I mention they don't lock the doors? I believe you did." He grinned. "Good. And we don't have roommates." Duly noted. I looked at those bedroom doors. Who else was here? I wanted to ask, but part of me was afraid of the answer. Was anyone still with the St. Clouds? Had anyone not made it? At any other time, those questions would have been the first words out of my mouth, but I was feeling not myself. Still off from the drugs, I guess. Dazed and bruised, physically and emotionally. As we walked down the steps, voices downstairs broke the hush. I strained to hear familiar ones, but they all sounded like adults and no one I knew. We passed at least a half-dozen people, a few obviously security, a couple who looked like medical personnel, and some who might have been house staff. Some stopped what they were doing, as if expecting Rafe to introduce us. "Kitchen's through there," he said, gesturing down a hall. "We've got free run of it. There's a list on the fridge where you can add anything you want. Meals are cooked and we eat." He motioned right past someone in the dining room there. He continued on, giving me the tour as if no one else was there. Treating them like furniture. It worked for me. Finally, he led me down another flight of stairs. "All the rec stuff is down here. An indoor gym for bad weather. Home theater. Game room." He glanced over as we reached the bottom step. "Yeah, it's like they consulted a stack of Teen Life magazines, trying to build the ultimate hangout. Ignoring the fact that our idea of playtime involves kayaks, rock climbing, dirt bikes." "Exactly." He opened the first door. "Here's the game room, complete with every console known to man, plus a prototype of a new kinetic one, just for us, 'cause we're so special. Special enough to get internet access on those consoles. Not a chance." 20. We walked inside. As we did, I stopped short. There was a girl sitting at a table across the room. She was bent over a piece of paper and seemed to be writing. Rafe tugged me forward. "Maya, I'd like to introduce you to someone." The girl at the table turned. When she did, I smiled. "Annie." I started forward, then shot a glance back at Rafe. "I believe we've met." "Not exactly," Annie said, and her voice was different, lower. Her smile was different, too. Not the exuberant grin I remembered, but something more tentative, almost shy. She stood and came toward me. Not flying at me, arms wide, the way she usually did, but just walking, her steps as tentative as her smile. I looked at the table and saw what she'd been doing. Drawing. I glanced at Rafe. He grinned and nodded, his face glowing again. They've... I began, struggling for the words. Fixed me, Annie said. For very brief periods so far. But it's a start. She walked over and hugged me, and even if it wasn't her usual rib-crushing embrace, it was still a real hug, tight and sincere. So you remember everything? I said. She waved us to the sofa and patted the spot beside her. I took it, and Rafe perched on the arm, still grinning. There are bits and pieces I don't remember, probably when I shifted. The rest is odd. Like I was watching myself. She shook her head. No, watching someone that looked like me and felt a bit like me, but wasn't, not really. It was like being. She blushed. Like being high unexpectedly. Which wouldn't be a new experience for me. When you're trying to break in as an artist, you can't always be sure that the wine is just wine. I felt high and happy and carefree, but inside, part of me was banging at the walls to get out. To come down. To be myself. And now you are. For short periods. They'll continue with the doses and they expect I should be back to myself in a few months. She paused. Rafe tells me you've shifted. I have. No. Problems. I tried not to think about what Nast said. Not yet. But I feel a lot better knowing there's a cure. They worked fast finding it. Not really, Rafe said. They already knew there were possible side effects. They had something ready in case this happened. Untested, but he shrugged. Obviously working. Annie clasped my hands. I'm glad you're okay, Maya. I know you don't want to be here, but I'm glad you're safe, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you. Really know you. She smiled at Rafe. You've made my brother happier than I've seen him in a very long time. Rafe rolled his eyes, but he still hadn't completely wiped the smile from his face. I knew I wasn't the only reason he was happy. This was what he wanted to help Annie. It was why he'd come to Salmon Creek. The reason for everything he'd done since he arrived. And with that, I'm going to take my leave and let you two catch up, Annie said as she stood. I'm sure Raphael doesn't want his big sister around for that. You don't have to, I began. My time's running out, she said. I only get about 20 good minutes every treatment. That doesn't matter, I said. You were fine before. I appreciate you saying that, Maya. I really do. I remember how kind you were to me. But if you're going to get to know the real me, I'd rather. She shrugged, looking uncomfortable. I'd rather stick to that. With you and with Rafe. We'll get our 20 minutes a few times a day, and that's it for now. Believe me, I've argued, Rafe muttered. But she's almost as stubborn as you. As Annie walked by, she reached out and ruffled his hair, as I'd seen her do before, but gentler now, only laughing when he grumbled, then patting his shoulder, waving to me and leaving us alone. Rafe waited until Annie closed the door behind her, then he slid onto the couch beside me. So, any ideas how we should spend our time alone? I hesitated. I didn't want to. I wanted to just grab him and kiss him and forget everything else. That's how it used to be. See Rafe, forget the rest of the world. But now that world was thundering in my head, with those photos of Daniel front and center. I turned away, trying to make it look casual, teasing even. But I needed that moment to clear my mind. Worrying about Daniel wouldn't help. I wanted to forget. Just for a minute. When I was ready, I glanced back at him and smiled. I might have a few ideas. You? He grinned. Maybe. I inched closer. I bet I can guess yours. I bet you can. Does it involve? I crossed the gap and leaned toward him. This. I thrust a game controller up between us. I play a mean game of Mario Kart. He laughed and pushed the controller aside. I'm sure you do. However, that's not quite what I had in mind. I waited until he bent for a kiss, then jumped up and grabbed a handful of cases from the coffee table. Call of Duty, I said, lifting one. He stood and stepped toward me. No. I backed up. Left 4 Dead. Another step forward. No. I continued moving back, waggling the cases in front of me. So you don't want to play games? Never said that. Just not those. I prefer something more physical. Got it. I shoved a case forward. WII fit. He laughed and plucked it from my hand. We did another 2-step, me back, him forward, his gaze on mine, his grin sending heat rushing through me. Do you like chasing? I said. His grin sparked. You know I do. Wrestling. Definitely. I held up Grand Theft Auto and WWE. He lunged. I dodged, dropping the games and racing across the room. He gave chase and I felt his fingers brush the back of my shirt. I veered and vaulted over the sofa. He tried to do an end run around it, but I quick-stepped the other way, then back again when he reversed course. We paced along our sides of the couch a few times. Then he sprinted. I raced around the other side. He lunged over the back, fingers grabbing my shirt and yanking me to him when I tried to run. Gotcha, he said. I rolled my eyes and let him pull me close. When we were almost touching, he relaxed his grip. I broke away. He managed to snag my leg with his foot. I stumbled. He caught my arm and redirected my fall, and the next thing I knew, I was lying on the couch, with Rafe over me, my arms around his neck. You are remarkably good at that, I said. It's all instinct. I smiled and pulled him down into a kiss. We were still down there, a few minutes later, when a voice over our heads said, Jesus. I know you guys have been separated for an entire 48 hours. But really? I looked up to see Samantha Russo standing there, arms crossed, looking remarkably like the teacher who'd caught Rafe and me making out behind the school. A crutch was propped under one arm. Yes, said another voice. Get a room. Please. When I looked at Haley, Sam said, don't suggest that or he will. And Maya's too gaga to resist. Rafe shot her the finger, but it was a cheerful gesture, as if even she couldn't spoil his mood. I got up and gave Haley a hug. It was awkward, we've never been friends, and she seemed surprised, but not displeased. Sam just scowled, arms crossing tighter, as if I might try the same thing on her. I didn't. So you're both okay? I said. You look okay. Sam shrugged. We're good. I wouldn't say good, Haley said. We're lab rats in a secured facility under 24-hour surveillance. Sam shrugged again. They haven't hurt us. They've helped Annie. They've fixed up my leg. It's not so bad, Really? Not so bad, I said. Rafe caught my hand and squeezed. We're having a difference of opinion that I'm sure we'll get into later. For now, let's just take a breather and get caught up. Haley nodded. What's happening with Corey and Daniel? They're okay, right? Still running? Still safe? The room seemed to freeze. My breath jammed in my throat and I could hear my blood pounding. Rafe led me back to the sofa. They're okay, but that's something Maya needs to talk about. If everyone can just Maya. Sam said. I know you can be insufferably bossy, and I never thought I'd say this, but can you please take back the reins of leadership here? Your loser boyfriend Sam. Haley hissed. Rafe only rolled his eyes. As you can tell, Sam and I have not miraculously become BFFs in the last couple of days. I'm sure Maya will have lots of ideas and plans, Samantha. But she just got here and hey, said a quiet voice from the doorway. I turned. There stood Nicole. For a moment I thought I was seeing things. Hoped I was seeing things. Hey, Nick, Rafe said. Look who's here. He pulled me up and smiled at us, and I had to stare at him for a moment before remembering. He didn't know. No one knew except. I glanced at Sam. She flushed and mouthed, sorry, then whispered under her breath, I didn't know what to do. Do about what? Haley asked. Nicole stood there, looking confused. Looking like the same Nicole I'd known for 10 years. Sweet and shy and uncertain. The girl Serena took under her wing, trying to boost her confidence. The girl I'd pushed Daniel toward after Serena's death, thinking she was just the thing to help him get over her. The girl I'd struggled to befriend, even if we didn't have much in common, feeling guilty that we couldn't get closer when she seemed to need a friend so much after Serena died. Now I looked at Nicole and I saw that girl, and I started wondering if I'd misjudged. If Sam and I had drawn the wrong conclusion. There was no way this girl could have done what we thought. Except I'd seen another girl in Nicole a few days ago. The one who'd lashed out at the campsite when I'd refused to rescue her. The one who'd tried to get me captured, too. Who'd shouted at Moreno to shoot me. To kill me. What mattered more to me was who we thought Nicole had killed. Serena. Get out of here, I said, barely able to open my jaw enough to get the words out. Rafe looked surprised at first, but seeing my face, that melted away and his own face hardened. He turned to Nicole. What did you do? He said. What did I do? She squeaked. Her blue eyes rounded and she flinched, like a whipped puppy seeing a raised hand. I don't understand. What's going on here? Haley said. I clenched my fists tighter and my face started to throb, as if I was about to shift. I took a deep breath and tried to find calm so I could explain. I don't understand, Nicole said again, tears welling up. Oh, stuff the theatrics, Sam said. She turned to the others. Nicole killed Serena. 21. Silence. Haley stared at Sam. Then at me. Nicole's mouth opened and closed as she made a strangled noise deep in her throat. Did you say? Haley began. Nicole drowned Serena. She dragged Maya under, too, probably as a warning. Then she tried to kill her after the crash. No, Haley said. Nicole was pulled under herself after the crash. I was there. Sam shook her head. She faked it. She dragged Maya down and wrapped her foot in some weeds. She hoped in the commotion, no one would realize Maya was missing until it was too late. But Maya got free. That's crazy, Nicole said. Why you've always hated me, Sam? You hated coming to live with us and you were jealous of me and no, you're the one who was jealous. Spiking my orange juice with vodka so I'd go to school drunk. Planting drugs in my bedroom. Drugs you got from volunteering at the clinic. Like the drugs you got to dope Maya at her party. That was Haley. Everyone knows it was. She worked at the clinic, too, and she hates Maya. I did not roofie Maya, Haley said. I didn't have access to the drug closet. She turned to us. Dr. Blair caught me sneaking Ritalin this summer. She took away my key. I couldn't tell you guys that without admitting I got caught stealing drugs. I asked Nicole to vouch for me, but Nicole crumpled, just let her legs give way and fell to the floor, hunched and sobbing. Haley looked at me. Even Rafe did. Uncertain looks from both of them. I had to admit, Nicole was a good actor. If I hadn't seen her switch from sweet Nicole to raving lunatic Nicole in a heartbeat at the campsite, I might have believed her myself. Even now I felt that niggle of doubt. Had I been wrong about people before? Oh, yeah. Repeatedly in the last couple of weeks. Starting with Rafe, which is why he stood here now, looking hesitant, studying my expression. He'd been the target of my snap judgments. So had Haley. Maya. Rafe said. Is that what you think? She killed Serena. Before I could answer, Nicole leaped to her feet with astonishing speed for someone who'd been in a puddle of misery a moment ago. Maya hasn't said that, Nicole insisted. Sam's the one doing all the talking. Maya's smart. She thinks things through and she knows there's no way I could have drowned Serena. How could I do that and escape without being spotted? By swimming under the water, Sam said. Seriously? How long would I have had to stay underwater? 10 minutes? That's impossible. I glanced at Haley, who'd gone quiet. It's not, is it? At least, not for the members of Salmon Creek's championship swim team. Serena could hold her breath for at least 5 minutes. I'm guessing you could do the same, Haley. Haley nodded. We all could. Me and Nicole and Serena. We used to have competitions when the coach wasn't watching. The winner was always. She looked at Nicole. Almost 15 minutes one time, until Serena freaked out, worrying Nick would hurt herself. None of us could stay under nearly that long. No. Nicole said. That's a lie. No one can hold her breath that long. No normal person, I said. But you're not normal, as I'm sure they've told you here already. You're a Xana. Your talents are singing and swimming, which I'm sure includes holding your breath. No. Nicole spun on Haley. You're lying about the competitions and you're lying about the drugs. If you can hold your breath so long, then you killed Serena. Killed her and drugged Maya. Why? What possible reason? Jealousy. You hated Serena because she was better than you in swimming and singing. You hated Maya because everyone thinks she's special. Yep, we're all jealous, Sam said. All except you. Right, Nick? Which is good, or else you really wouldn't want to hear about Daniel and Maya. What? Daniel and Maya, Sam walked toward her. Who do you think comforted Maya when she thought Rafe was dead? Who do you think got really close to her on that long walk through the woods? What? I said. If you mean oh, Nicole knows what I mean. Gotta hand it to you, Maya, you played the grief card perfectly. Completely blindsided poor Daniel. What? I stared at Sam. I could see Rafe hesitating, looking confused. confused and hurt. "Don't lie, Maya," Sam said. "I saw you and Daniel together that night. Awfully chilly to have all those clothes off, but you seemed to be keeping warm just fine." Nicole flew at me then, her face twisted with rage. "She knocked me flying." Rafe and Sam jumped in to pull her off, but she grabbed my hair and wrapped it around her fingers, yanking, hitting and clawing with her free hand. I managed to grab her by the hair and yanked her off me. She yowled and kept coming, clawing and hitting, not caring that hanks of her own hair were ripping free as they held her back. Finally, I pinned her. I could feel the shift coming, my skin pulsing, my face changing. She could see that and still she kept fighting. I got my hand around her throat. Then the door slammed open and 2 guards raced in. I backed off Nicole fast. They hit her with a needle, but she wouldn't stop trying to get me and they had to haul her out. "You," she shrieked back at me. "You think what I did to Serena was bad? Just wait until I get a hold of you." They dragged her away, still spewing threats. I stood there, doubled over, catching my breath. Haley helped me straighten and led me to the sofa, then sat beside me. "Are you okay?" she asked. I gulped in breaths as the shift slowly reversed. Haley looked up at Rafe. "I don't know what Sam was talking about, because I never saw anything happen between Maya and Daniel." "Because nothing did." I pushed up and advanced on Sam. "I don't know what game you're playing, but nothing, oh, of course, nothing happened," Sam said. "Like you'd watch your boyfriend die and jump the next available guy." She turned to Rafe. "And if your boyfriend thinks for a second that was possible, he doesn't know you at all." "You caught me off guard," Rafe said. "I just didn't know what you were playing at. I didn't think Maya did it. Only he had thought I did. Or at least, he'd entertained the possibility. I'd seen it on his face." "I think it's clear what I was playing at," Sam said. "Setting off Nicole. It worked, didn't it? When it comes to Daniel, she's got a few screws loose. More than a few. Now everyone's seen it, and she confessed to killing Serena, so it's all good." "All good," Haley said, standing. "Not only did you just accuse Maya of messing around with Daniel, but you've convinced Nicole that she did." "Nicole? The girl who murdered Serena because she was dating Daniel. The girl who tried to murder Maya because she's friends with him. And that's all good." Sam sputtered and spewed excuses, but I could tell she hadn't thought it through. Now I was trapped in a house with someone who truly wanted me dead. The door opened again. In walked Nast, followed by Moreno, a guard, and a woman I didn't recognize. Moreno was talking, as usual. "Look, I know you're in charge, sir, but Calvin asked I don't give what Calvin asked for. I told him to control his daughter." Nast headed for me. Rafe moved closer. "Get out of here, boy," Nast said. "Playtime's over. Take them," a dismissive wave at Sam and Haley, "with you." They made no move to leave. Nast didn't seem to notice, just continued bearing down on me. "1 hour, he said. "You haven't even been conscious for 1 hour and already you're attacking." "She didn't attack anyone," Rafe said. "Nicole jumped her." Nast looked at Rafe. He didn't even seem to focus on him, just curled his lip, like Rafe was beneath his notice, before waving at the guard and saying, "Get them out of here." "It was self-defense," Sam said. "Nicole attacked her." "Get them out." Nast didn't raise his voice, but the guard jumped as if he'd shouted. He took both Haley and Sam by the arm and propelled them to the door. "Moreno? Take the boy. Now." Moreno wasn't so quick to obey. He sauntered forward, waving at Rafe. "Come on, kid. Your girlfriend needs to go with the doc for a checkup." I caught Rafe's eye and mouthed, "Go on." A second guard appeared as Moreno and Rafe left. Nast pointed to me. "Take her to the lab for Dr. Wiley. And be careful." He met my gaze. "Her wild streak is showing." 22. Dr. Wiley was the woman who'd been standing there, silently observing. She followed as the guard led me away. We headed upstairs and into another hall. As Rafe said, the house was huge. This seemed like a wing, with doors lining the corridor. A few were open and I could see what looked like work areas. An office. A computer lab. A staff lounge. Dr. Wiley opened the next door. Inside was a medical office, complete with paper-covered examining table and gown. I hesitated. "It's a physical, Maya," Dr. Wiley said without looking back. "On the table, please." "Sitting." The guard backed out of the room. As he was closing the door, a hand grabbed it. Moreno walked in. When he did, I felt a weird flutter of relief at seeing a familiar face. Which was stupid, really, because Moreno was no friend of ours. But at least he was a threat I knew. One I understood. "Hey, Doc," he said. "I'm busy." "Yeah, I see that. Only. Wasn't Inglis supposed to do the examination on Maya?" "Pretty sure she was. Pretty sure Cal insisted on it. Mr. Antone and Dr. Inglis are unavailable. Mr. Nast wants the examination done immediately. He's concerned about Maya's behavior." Moreno gave a derisive snort. "Only because he wasn't the one chasing her through the forest for 3 days. Otherwise he'd know that misbehavior is pretty much par for the course with Miss Maya." He turned to me. "Isn't it?" I gave him a look. He laughed. "The killer glare. You inherited that from your daddy." He lifted a hand. Yeah. Rick Delaney is your daddy. Spare me the protest." Back to Dr. Wiley. "If Mr. Nast thinks Maya's bad now, he should just be glad her partner in crime isn't here. First time I met those two? Maya tried to question me while her Benandanti buddy knocked me around. It was kinda cute, actually. Beating an interrogation." Dr. Wiley said. "We have a very different definition of cute, Mr. Moreno." "Maybe. But the point is, she isn't acting out of character. Which means this examination isn't necessary. I'm sure you have other things to do. You go do them. I'll take Miss Maya back to the others, and Dr. Inglis can examine her later. My orders are to conduct a physical. I take my orders from Mr. Nast." She looked his way. "As do you." Moreno blustered some more, but when Dr. Wiley picked up the phone to call security, he shut up and took a seat. The doctor settled for compressing her lips in a thin line of disapproval as she turned her attention to me. "I've been having physicals all my life. I always figured they were just the normal kind everyone talks about. Now I suspect mine were a little different. They were certainly thorough. At home, we all dreaded the twice-annual Tahur appointment. This one started exactly as I remembered. Height, weight, blood pressure, eyes, ears, throat, chest. She drew blood. 10 vials. Nothing more than I was used to, but I could see Moreno's eyes widen a little as she passed number 5 and kept going. When she was done with the blood, she sent it out immediately. I got juice and cookies while she waited for the lab tech. It was the same kinds of juice and cookies I'd been getting since I was 5, which was creepy. The Nasts hadn't just bought us, they'd bought everything about us, replicating each detail to ease the transition. I shivered. Cold? Dr. Wiley asked. I shook my head. She frowned. Have you been shivering a lot recently? No. Anything more serious? Shaking? Convulsions? The girl shivered. Document. Mr. Moreno, I'm going to ask you to leave now. Ah, Moreno leaned back in his seat. Fine. I'll be quiet. I'm afraid that won't be sufficient. I need to conduct a thorough examination, which requires. She picked up the robe and waggled it at him. Still he hesitated. Mr. Moreno. Yet. He stood and walked over to me. Your dad will be here soon, kiddo. Dr. Wiley sniffed and waved him out. I watched him go. Okay, what was that about? I'd sensed the tension between Antone and Nast earlier, but I hadn't given it much thought. Antone was more accustomed to giving orders than taking them. But Moreno's hovering? That was weird, as was his insistence on waiting for Antone and drive. Inglis. Something was going on here. Serious tension, and not just between Antone and Nast. I could see Dr. Inglis being uncomfortable having someone else work on me. I was hers, and there was bound to be conflict between the Nast camp and the former St. Cloud employees. But Antone and Moreno had been with the Nasts since this had begun. The rest of the physical was exactly what I'd had since I turned 12, right down to the order of the steps. Physical exam. Pap smear. Breast examination. Cheek swab. Vitamin injection. And, finally, the sour apple lollipop. I stared at the green sucker. Seriously? We were told you liked green apple. She opened the drawer and pulled out a bag. We have cherry, raspberry. Even. She picked up a brown one. Root beer? Oh, yes, that'd be for Daniel. I stared at that brown sucker. My stomach twisted. She set it on the counter where I could see it. Do you know what happens when a car strikes the human body, Maya? Yes, Daniel got up and walked away. I'm sure he just felt battered and bruised. But the force of that impact must have done damage. Internal damage. He could go to sleep feeling fine and then never wake up. I clenched my fists to keep from shaking as panic whipped through me. They're exaggerating. You know they are. Corey will take care of him. Trust Corey and trust Daniel. Worry won't help you get out of here. You need to focus on escape. I don't know where he is, I said. I think you do. I don't. We got separated, then he'll find a place you all stayed before that and go there to wait. You need to tell us there's nothing to tell. I hopped off the exam table, scooped up my clothes, and retreated behind the curtain to dress. 23. I left the examination room to discover we were all on lockdown pending an investigation of my allegations against Nicole. That didn't explain why all the others would be confined. I suspect Nast was just happy for the excuse. At least they let me keep Kenji. Antone's orders, apparently. They'd brought in her dishes and bedding. I supposed he thought I'd be grateful. I wasn't. Or, at least, I didn't want to be. I'd only been in my room for a few minutes when Antone himself arrived with lunch. I considered rejecting it, on principle, but if I was stuck here I needed allies, and at this point Antone seemed my most promising option. I want to talk to you about your brother, he said as he pulled a chair over to where I sat cross-legged on the bed. I don't know where Ash, I just want to talk about him. He popped open an energy drink and took a few slugs. You know that stuff is all marketing, I said. You're better off having a Coke and some vitamins. Cheaper, too. He smiled. I'll remember that. I squirmed, as if giving him advice was an olive branch I hadn't meant to extend. I'm not the enemy, Maya. Yet, you keep saying that. Funny, because I could swear it was you I saw during the forest fire, pointing a gun at me. A tranquilizer gun. Because you were about to run back into a burning forest. I took a bite of my sandwich. About Ashton, he said. Ash. He hates Ashton. Ash. He pondered. All right, then. Ash. Again he smiled and I realized he took this as another sign I was opening up. Helping him get to know us better. How much has Ash told you about his life, Maya? I shrugged. In other words, he's told you some, but you aren't going to share it with me in case you'd be telling me things I don't know. I can assure you that's very unlikely, and not why I was asking. I just don't want to tell you anything you already know. Still I said nothing. He waited a moment, then nodded. All right. From the top then. Your mother kept him when she gave you up. It seems she thought she'd call less attention to herself with him. I bristled. Why? Did I cry too much? Was I causing trouble already? I was only a few months old. That's not it, Maya. I'm sure you wonder what you did to make her choose him. The answer, as far as I can tell, is nothing. But your mother is only half Navajo and she doesn't look it. She can pass for Caucasian easily. You can't. Your brother. He shrugged. He can't pass for white, but he could clearly be her son. With you. People would have noticed. They can pretend they don't, but they do. If the St. Clouds went looking for a white woman with a Native American baby, they'd have had a lot easier time finding you. She knew that. So when she made her choice, she kept Ash. I turned the popkin around in my hands. But that only made it easier for you to find me, didn't it? An abandoned native baby. He nodded. So she basically tossed me to you and the St. Clouds so she could escape. Antone rubbed the back of his neck. I don't want to malign your mother. What she did to you was wrong. But I have to admit it was for the best. At least compared to what she did to Ash. She dumped him. He sucked in breath and seemed to be struggling to put a better slant on it. Finally, he said, yes, she dumped him, and in his voice I heard all the bitterness I'd seen on Ash's face. It took him a moment to continue. I would like to think she did it for him. That she believed the St. Clouds were closing in and this was his best chance. The couple she gave him to were decent people. Not as good as your adoptive parents, but they did try. Then, when Ash was 10, his foster father was involved in a serious accident. He lost his job. They had 3 other children. They couldn't contact your mother, so Ash entered the system. The foster care system. Antone nodded. In some cases it works well. There are wonderful, loving parents who sign up. And then there are the rest. Those who do it for money. It's never easy for children of any minority. But in the area where Ash was living there wasn't a strong native community. No native community, really. That was hard on him. Really hard. He acted out. By 13, after a dozen placements, he ended up in a group home. He stayed 2 weeks. Then he was gone. He's been on the streets ever since. I shook my head. But he's been in contact with. I snapped my mouth shut hard. In contact with other parents who left? Yes, I know. That's how I've gotten my information. Let's just say one of those parents isn't nearly as trustworthy as Ash believes. He paused. No, I shouldn't say that. I suspect Ash knows they aren't trustworthy. Otherwise, I'd have found him by now. He doesn't give away anything, even to them. But when Ash ran, he went searching online for answers and, at that time, he hadn't yet learned to be quite so careful. Someone found him. A man who used to work for the Edison Group. Cyril Mitchell. I didn't say that, of course. I just waited for him to go on. From all accounts, Mr. Mitchell was a decent man. If I could have gotten in touch with him, this would have gone much better, but my contact was playing both sides and wasn't about to do anything to jeopardize that. Mitchell tracked down Ash and tried to give him a place to stay, but Ash had had enough of that with his foster parents. Eventually Mitchell realized he had a choice: help Ash from a distance or lose him completely. He went with the former. He seems to have tried to give him money, but the only thing Ash would accept was information. On the experiment. Antone nodded. So your brother has been on the streets for 3 years. You can try to understand that, but I don't think you can, Maya. I can't, either. Like you, I was raised by a wonderful family. Not wealthy, but certainly comfortable. If I needed clothing, I got it. If I asked for name brands, my parents would talk to me about peer pressure, but if I wanted it badly enough, I got it. Outgrow my bicycle? Get a new one. 18th birthday? Get a car. Not new, but still a car. College? Sure. Ivy League? If I could get in, which I did. I wasn't spoiled, but I was loved and, yes, indulged. Does that all sound familiar? I said nothing. Your brother has never had that. Never. Not with your mother. Not with the family she gave him to. Certainly not with his foster parents. But compared to what he has now? He was as pampered as a prince. Antone leaned forward. He has nothing, Maya. Nothing. He has me. I didn't mean to say it. I could hear Ash's voice in my ear, scoffing, yeah, thanks. That and $5 will buy me lunch. But as I said it, I meant it. When I got out of here, I'd find him. I'd be whatever he needed me to be, and it had nothing to do with hearing the story of his life. When I said that, Antone pulled back. I thought he was offended I'd just met my brother and I was presuming so much. But his eyes glimmered. I'm glad to hear that, Maya. I don't think I can tell you how much it means to me, seeing the two of you together, looking out for each other. A deep breath. But he has me, too. I can give him everything he needs. Everything you and I had growing up. He met my gaze. Don't you think that's what he'd want? If he does, then he knows where to find it. He knows you're here. He won't come to me. Then you'll need to find him and ask him what he wants. Because I won't help you. 24. Antone had to leave it at that, as I was soon taken away for yet another medical appointment. A psych exam. Apparently Nast was a little concerned about my mental health. I didn't cooperate nearly as well with that one. I mean, seriously? I'd just discovered I was a skinwalker and part of a secret science experiment, then I had been chased, nearly killed in a helicopter crash, nearly drowned by a friend, chased some more, discovered my town empty, realized my parents thought I was dead, got chased some more. The way I saw it, I was lucky I was still psychologically functioning at all. Of course, if I pointed that out, they'd take full credit for having made me strong enough to withstand this. So I was not the most cooperative subject. Unfortunately, I couldn't outright refuse, because that would only give them further proof of my damaged psychological state. So I answered the questions with the minimum required response until the psychologist got frustrated and gave up. I hoped to return to my room then. No such luck. When the shrink left, the boss came in, accompanied by Dr. Inglis. Now it was time for the talk. I could have skipped it. I knew what Nast would say. The same message I'd heard at every encounter with the cabals. Resistance is futile. Yes, he admitted, things had gone wrong. Mina Lee shouldn't have come poking around, arousing our suspicions. The whole forest fire and helicopter kidnapping scheme? A bureaucratic mix-up. Yes, Nast actually blamed it on confusion at the corporate level, as if some misdirected memo had killed Mayor Tilson. I know you're still children, Nast began. Dr. Inglis cleared her throat and he amended that to young adults. I'm not sure which was more condescending, calling us kids or thinking we'd respond better if they humored our delusions of maturity. At your age, you don't have to think about your future, Nast continued. Sure, we do, I said. I've been thinking about my future a lot. Everything I'm missing. Like my hot date with Rafe for Friday or the big beer bash we had planned for Saturday night. His lips tightened. We have plans, I said. I want to be a veterinarian. Daniel wants to be a lawyer. Serena wanted to swim on the Olympic team and study sports psychology. You've heard of Serena, right? My best friend? Murdered by one of your subjects, gone psycho. We don't know that for certain, Nast said. She admitted it. Dr. Inglis inched forward. We do agree that Nicole appears to be responsible for Serena's death, Maya. We just don't know if the experiment had anything to do with that. Mental illness can have many causes. Whatever. We do have dreams. All of us. And none include being prisoners or cabal slaves for the rest of our lives. Cabal slaves? Nast laughed. Do my employees look that miserable? Yes, we expect a return on our investment. We expect you to work for us, in the same way that the Army expects military service after paying for a college degree. But people join the Army knowing that it's a willing exchange of services. He waved off the distinction. Think of it as being a very privileged young woman, which you are. You will get the best care and the best education, and when you graduate, you will have a guaranteed job waiting. A job that will pay you a six-figure starting salary, in addition to covering all living expenses. How many young people dream of such an opportunity? They dream of that as an option. A choice. Another wave as if to say, such a petty distinction, really. You'll have choices, Maya. You all will. Daniel can certainly become a lawyer. The cabal can always use more. He'd attend the Ivy League school of his choosing. A smug smile. We can guarantee it whatever his grades. As for you, while we don't have much call for veterinarians, I happen to know you weren't as set on that career as you're pretending now. I'm sure we could find something that matched your interests. You didn't resurrect extinct species to become lawyers, I said. You'll want more from us. We'll have other tasks, yes. But there's no need to worry about that now. The point is that you will be taken care of. Very well taken care of. In a gilded cage, I said, waving at the house. Dr. Inglis stepped forward. No, Maya. This is just temporary. Do you remember what I said about finding you another Salmon Creek? We have. That's where you'll live until you go away to college. After that, you'd be free to live on your own, as any other young person would. Nast leaned forward. Except you won't be living in a dingy one-room apartment in a questionable part of town. You would get a condo your average college grad can't afford unless she comes from a very wealthy family. He smiled. Which, in a way, you do. What if I just want to come from the family I have now? My parents. Silence. I turned to Dr. Inglis. You said you're setting up Salmon Creek too. I assume it'll be just like the first, right? As close as we can get. So my parents will be there. She looked momentarily stricken, as if she'd thought they'd come close to selling me the deal, and the decision now rested on a response she couldn't give. I knew she couldn't give it. But I sat there, looking expectant. Your father will be there, Nast said. I gave him a look that said I wasn't dignifying that with a response. Then I turned back to Dr. Inglis. My parents will know soon, right? They'll come live with me. Just like before. You remember my parents? I said. You've known them for 11 years. You've been to our house. You've gone to lunch with my mom. Your adoptive parents can't join you, Maya, Nast said. I kept my gaze on Dr. Inglis. I saw you at the memorial service. And you saw them, right? My parents? They seemed okay with me being dead, didn't they? She looked away fast. This is for the best, Nast said. Perhaps, if you kids hadn't run like that, we could have avoided the ruse of your deaths. I said, wheeling on him. When we crashed, we were being kidnapped. Of course we ran. You never intended to return us to our parents. The crash just gave you a really good, really permanent way to do that. Permanent, he said, drawing the word out. Yes, it is permanent, Maya, because there's no way we can reverse it without endangering the project. Your parents are human. They know nothing of the experiment or of supernaturals in general. If they found out, they would go to the authorities, which would be catastrophic. Catastrophic for us if the authorities believed them, but more so for your parents, when they didn't. And that's presuming they don't reject you outright. A girl who can change into a mountain lion. He shook his head. You're not theirs. Not really. For once, I suspect they'd be glad of it. My parents would never. Of course they wouldn't, Dr. Inglis cut in. They will mourn you. Deeply mourn you. But, after a time, they will move on. In fact, we're pulling in the full medical resources of both the Nast and St. Cloud corporations. When your mother is ready, we're going to offer to help her conceive. Help her. Many advances have been made in the years since they adopted you. We firmly believe that, with the right treatments, your parents could have a child of their own. Wow, I said. It's like losing your dog pound mutt and getting a purebred puppy in its place. They're so lucky. My hands started to pulse. I looked down at them, certain I was imagining things. But I wasn't. The skin had begun to ripple. Why was I shifting? It only seemed to happen when I got stressed. Sure, I wasn't happy with this conversation, but they'd said nothing I didn't expect. I was annoyed and frustrated, but my heart was chugging along at a normal almost as soon as I thought that, it sped up so fast I had to gasp for breath. What was happening to me? Maya. Dr. Inglis said. I turned to her and when I saw her face, rage filled me. Blind rage, like in my room, with Nast. But I wasn't enraged with her. I was annoyed and frustrated and hurt. Yet as that untethered rage shot through me, it brought a wave of memories, of all the times I'd trusted her, all the times my parents had trusted her. As if my brain was finding reasons for the anger. I gripped the arms of the chair and closed my eyes. Maya. Dr. Inglis touched my shoulder and I had to clench the chair harder to keep from smacking her hand away. She's shifting, Nast murmured as if I couldn't hear. No, as if I don't matter. As if I'm nothing more than the rage surged and I clamped down as hard as I could. Maya. Dr. Inglis said. Can you tell us what you're feeling? What you're thinking? I'm thinking of launching out of this chair and taking you down. I'm thinking of putting my hands around your throat. I jerked forward, a whimper escaping. What was happening to me? It was like I was outside myself, watching a stranger. Annie's words came back. It was like watching myself. No, watching someone who looked like me and felt a bit like me, but wasn't, not really. No. I wasn't reverting. I was stressed out, and they were making it worse by telling me to forget my parents. They'll certainly forget you. After we give them a real daughter. My arms started to throb. Don't think about that. Think about anything except your parents and Ash and Daniel. Daniel out there, injured, maybe even do not think about that. I took a deep breath and struggled to think of something innocent and meaningless. Think back to what I'd been doing before all this happened. Back in Salmon Creek before everything started with Rafe and Mina Lee. Biology. I'd had a midterm coming up and I'd really wanted to ace it. I was always in competition with Brendan in bio and we'd laid a wager on who would do better this time. Winner got lunch at the blender, which meant I needed to win, because Brendan could really pack away Maya. Dr. Inglis shook my shoulder. No. Leave me. She's stopped it, Dr. Inglis said. I opened my eyes and saw her staring at me. When I looked down at my hands, they'd gone back to normal. The rage had evaporated. Dr. Inglis bent in front of me. That was excellent, Maya. Can you tell me how you reversed the process? Nast brushed her aside. That's not important. Tell us what happened, Maya. You got angry, didn't you? I could see it. I looked at him, then turned to Dr. Inglis. I'd like to leave now. You'll leave when Nast began. Yes, I think that's a good idea, said a voice behind us. I turned to see Antone in the doorway, his hand still on the knob, his breath coming fast, like he'd been running. Moreno stood behind him. Nast rose. If you want to watch this discussion, Calvin, the video feed is active. I've been watching. He walked in. Under the terms of our agreement, sir, I am allowed to veto any treatment of my daughter. I'm going to ask that you allow me to cut this interview short. It's been too much for her and the strain is clearly showing. That isn't strain, Nast said. She's reverting. You know it and I know it, and coddling the girl isn't going to change that. As they argued, Dr. Inglis tried to reassure Antone, verbally tripping over herself. Behind him, Moreno rolled his eyes and shot a smirk my way, as if we were sharing some secret. Finally, Nast agreed they were done with the interview anyway, so Antone could take me. He led me out as Moreno stayed behind to talk to Nast. You started to shift, didn't you? Antone whispered as we walked down the hall. I considered ignoring him, but that seemed petty. Not just petty but unwise. What's that saying about the fire and the frying pan? Antone was my frying pan. It wasn't a comfortable place to be, but it was safe, at least compared to the fire. I did. I know what they were saying wasn't easy to hear, but you didn't seem that angry. I wasn't. Not until. Until what? Did they say something to trigger it? I don't think so. I was okay. And then I wasn't. I don't know how to explain Calvin. Pumps clicked on the hardwood as Dr. Inglis jogged toward us. Antone looked back, then turned away and kept walking. Calvin, please. He slowed until she caught up. I'm so sorry about, she began. He stopped so abruptly she fell back. You were supposed to be in there for me. In my stead. Watching out for my daughter's interests. I trusted you, Maggie, and when things went wrong, you were right in there, pushing Maya as hard as he was. Her mouth opened and closed, and she stared up at him with, oh God! I recognized that look. Any teenage girl did. Dr. Inglis had a crush on my biological father. A serious, starry-eyed, OMG, I'd do anything for you kind of crush. Ick. I suppose I shouldn't say that. I'm not the kind of kid who freaks out when I catch my parents kissing. I don't think romance is reserved for those under the age of 20. And yet, seeing Dr. Inglis making goo-goo eyes at Antone just seemed creepy. She was an attractive, smart, accomplished woman. She shouldn't be simpering over any man. I suspect it didn't seem as creepy to Antone. But he didn't exactly return her moonstruck gaze. Just stood there. I'm sorry, Calvin. I thought I was helping. It won't happen again. He hesitated, as if considering. Have you gotten the results of Maya's physical yet? No, but I'll do that right away. He didn't exactly smile, but his face relaxed and she breathed an audible sigh of relief. I looked at him. You're using her. You know how she feels and you're using her. And I don't care. Part of me feels bad for her, but mostly, I'm beyond that. Whatever works. Whatever helps. 25. Dr. Inglis left and Antone led me to my room. He didn't say a word until the door was closed. I walked to the bed and sat. Kenji I hopped up and laid down with her head on my lap. So they told you the grand plan, Antone said. Yep. I get a brand new life. Everything I could ever want. Except my parents, but that's okay, because they'll get a new puppy baby. He sat beside me on the bed. If you think that means the Delaney's will forget you, they won't. You really think I'm worried about that? I shook my head. I'm not replaced. I'm at the basic lack of respect for my parents. They lost a daughter? Let's give them a new one. A real one. Then everyone will be happy. Except you. Oh, I'm sure I'll be happy. I get a new puppy, too. A brand new daddy. Lucky me. He flinched at my sarcasm, and I reminded myself that I couldn't do this anymore. I didn't have to suck up to him, I couldn't, but nor could I afford to antagonize him. This isn't what I wanted either, Maya, he said after a moment. What did you want? He took a moment before answering. Contact. That's all I've wanted for years, since you got too old to be taken from the Delaney's. I just wanted to be part of your life. I won't make excuses. I allowed the Nasts to commandeer that rescue helicopter. They promised it would be temporary. They'd tell you kids what you were and, they hoped, woo you from the St. Clouds. Like headhunting new employees? Seriously. That's what you are to them, Maya. Very valuable future employees. The cabals. I can't get into it now, but this isn't unusual, fighting for rare supernatural types. The Nasts would have laid out the situation. Positioned themselves, not as the people who kidnapped you, but as the people who were honest with you. Told you the truth. Let you make your own choices. And let me go back to my parents. Yes. I know you don't believe that, but I'm really not the enemy here, Maya. I'm the guy trying to make the best of a lousy situation. An impossible situation. He looked at me. You understand that, don't you? The situation. You can't escape it. There's no place to go. You need the cabals. Good. He hesitated. Then said, slowly, good. Yes, good, because that means we can negotiate. Negotiate. I paused. Daniel and I had discussed this, but only briefly. Negotiate with our captors? We'd rather fight and we'd win. Win what? Our freedom? No, because even if we got our friends and our families back, we were still held prisoner by our conditions. Corey's headaches would get worse, Annie would stop progressing, and I'd continue regressing. I took a deep breath. They want happy little future employees? Let's back up a step. Back to what they planned before the crash. They can pitch us their packages. We'll make our own decisions, including the decision to be reunited with our parents. He went quiet. Very quiet. When he tried to speak, his breath hitched and he had to take another moment. Then he looked me in the eyes. That's a very mature solution, Maya. Remarkably mature, and you have no idea how proud I am of you right now, for even thinking of it. So we can, right? I knew the answer. I'd seen it in his face as soon as I suggested it. Pride and pain. Mostly pain. The cabals would never allow that, Maya. The risk of telling your parents, after they've buried you. He shook his head. And after they paid good money for us. It wasn't money. It was a trade of resources and intelligence. I gave him a look. Do you really think that matters? We're bought and paid for, whatever the currency. They say they want us happy, but they really just want us compliant. I looked at him. I don't do compliant. 26. If it wasn't for the light coming through my window, I'd have been certain it was night by now. It had to be, after everything that had happened. I'd been in my room for about an hour, just lying on the bed, thinking. No, not thinking. Worrying. About Daniel. I couldn't see a way out of this prison, so there was nothing to think about except a very general, incredibly unhelpful I need to get out and find him. And, while I was getting out, I needed to take Rafe and Annie and Sam and Haley and Kenji and how was I going to manage that, short of having an armored minivan break through the gates and rescue us. A staccato rap at the door broke my reverie. The door cracked open. Decent? Rafe asked. Yab. He pushed it open. If you're hoping to see something, the trick is to not knock first. That would be wrong, he said as he walked in. The trick is to hope you say no, but come in anyway. Ah. I patted the bed. He waggled his brows. I shook my head and he murmured another. I laughed and watched him cross the room and I felt lighter. Like the weight lifted, not completely but enough for me to function again. He didn't sit, but just reached over to pet Kenji. I was hoping to talk you into coming up on the roof with me. Lockdown is lifted. My door was open. Your door was open. I take it that means we can wander and, if it doesn't, we'll just get on the roof fast, before they notice. Good plan. I glanced at Kenji and was about to ask if she could come when he patted his leg, and she jumped up and followed us to the door. When he motioned for her to wait, she sat. I do believe you've stolen my dog, I said. Not quite. But we have been roomies for the last couple of days. They wanted to kennel her. I said. She's a smart dog. She knew her choices were to behave or sleep on a cement floor. Thank you. He shrugged and opened the door. I caught it in my hand. No, really. Thank you. I leaned over and kissed him. When I pulled back, he was grinning. See, I'm not as dumb as I look. Most girls like flowers, candy, walks on the beach. But the way to your heart is through your pets. He paused. And your friends, but I'm not doing so well with that part of my master plan. We walked into the hall, Kenji trailing. Are Sam and Haley giving you a hard time? I asked as he led me the other way down the hall. Sam, always. Haley's not exactly chatty. I can't blame her. I was a real jerk to her, leading her on. I was trying to make inroads with Nicole and that seemed to be going better, until... I'm sorry I didn't tell you. No way you could have. I'm just... shocked. Disgusted. I keep telling myself she must be mentally ill or something, but that doesn't make it better, you know? I don't see how anyone could do that, crazy or not. He looked over. I'm sorry you had to go through this. Finding out. It must have been. He paused. At least you had Daniel. He doesn't know. We'd reached the door at the hall's end. He stopped and looked over, frowning. How can I tell him? I said. She killed Serena over him. And, worse, he'd been about to break it off, and if he'd only done that a little faster. Then she went after you, he murmured. I nodded. I don't get that. There's never been anything between Daniel and me. I guess it's only proof she's crazy. He hit the buzzer for someone to open the door. It clicked open. On the other side were stairs heading up to another door. He waved me forward. You're right about Daniel. That's a Thai thing to pile on anyone. He doesn't deserve it. He's a good guy. He is. I glanced back. And thank you for saying that. I know he hasn't always been a good guy to you. Hey, like I said, the way to your heart is through your friends Ferd and otherwise. He's had reason to be wary of me. I'm hoping I'll get the chance to change his mind. You will. We climbed the steps, Kenji following. At the top, I opened the door and we found ourselves walking onto a roof. If I'd hoped for a huge flat roof with plenty of room to roam, I was disappointed. I suppose, being the daughter of an architect, I should have known better. Putting a flat roof on a house is not only problematic, but would give it an odd, industrial look. So we only had one flat section, maybe 5 meters by 7. And with high walls on all sides, the patch of late-day sun was barely enough to bask in. Looks like a prison exercise yard, doesn't it? He waved at the basketball net and weight deck. Even got the cameras. There and there. He pointed them out. Not quite what you were hoping for, I'm sure, he said. But these are cool. He walked to a set of balance beams and swung up. I took a running leap and landed in a crouch. Then I sat straddling the beam. Show off. I grinned. If I was showing off, I'd have landed standing up. If you could, I'm sure you would have. Is that a challenge? I swung my leg over to jump off, but he caught a handful of my shirt. Not yet. Up first. He let go of my shirt and rose, one foot in front of the other, standing as easily as if he was on solid ground. I joined him and when I did, I let out a gasp. I could see over the wall. Not much, but enough to catch a glimpse of our surroundings. We were on a mountainside, high enough that I could see distant treetops and roofs of other houses. The surge of happiness didn't last long, though. While it was wonderful seeing trees, it only reminded me that I was stuck in a walled compound, unable to get to them, touch them, climb them. I could barely even smell them through the overwhelming stink of new construction. Yeah, it's not much, Rafe said. Just enough of a peak to make us feel like we're doing something we shouldn't. Can't get a real sense of the place. Of our surroundings, he meant. Where we were and how we could escape it. I stood there, on tiptoe, staring out, wondering where Daniel was, how he was, how I'd get to him. Worrying about Daniel. There was something in Rafe's tone that made me look over sharply. Of course you are, he said quickly. Dumb question, hey. He tried for a smile, but didn't quite find it and settled for lowering himself to the beam again, breaking eye contact. He's jealous. Please no. Not Rafe. I've been dealing with jealous boyfriends since I first started dating. A lot of guys don't like their girlfriend having a male best friend. Considering I'd only dated summer boys and dated casually at that, it wasn't usually a big problem. A couple times, though, I'd gotten an ultimatum by the second or third date: you want to go out with me? You stop hanging out with him. The answer was always simple. You don't want me hanging out with him? I don't go out with you. No exceptions. With Rafe, though, I'd never gotten any flack over Daniel. He seemed to accept my friendship for what it was. Now I remembered his expression when Sam accused me of fooling around with Daniel. I looked at him, sitting on the beam, gazing around as if the blank walls were fascinating. Don't do this, Rafe. Please, please, please don't do this. I moved closer, whining softly. Rafe looked up. You want to talk about it? My throat seized. Finally I forced out, talk about what? Daniel. You're worried and I don't blame you. Maybe if we hash it out, you'll feel better. I exhaled and slid down to sit, straddling the beam, facing him. Thanks, but I think talking will only make it worse. I'd rather be distracted. Ah. A flicker of a smile. Like maybe. He waved at the hoops. A little one-on-one. Exactly. I slid closer. Just not with a basketball. He inched back, hands going up as he struggled not to grin. Hold on. I object to being used like that, you know. Really? I do. It's... He met my gaze and his sentence trailed off. I thought about kissing him, about what it felt like, the feel of him, the smell of him. Usually, that was all it took. But now, that quickening pulse took a moment longer. It did come, though, when I concentrated. I looked over and saw the answering spark in his eyes, the amber glowing, pupils dilating. You were saying? I murmured. He crossed the short space between us so fast I didn't even notice him moving, and then he was there. When we kissed, I waited for those doubts to vanish, for that feeling to return. It was there, but different. I was too distracted. I had to stop worrying about the roof door crashed open. Good God, Sam said as she hobbled out. Is that all you two do? No wonder she's still with you, Rafe. You're too busy making out to actually have a conversation so she can see what an ID you are. Rafe stiffened. I squeezed his leg and looked over my shoulder. I've been sent to invite you to join us for dinner. Sam hooked her thumb back toward the door and I saw a guard there. He's been sent to hustle your asses if you don't move them. We jumped off the bar. 27. They locked me in my room that night. Locked all of us in. For our own good, until they could move Nicole to a secured area. Really, it seemed like more of an excuse to keep us all in our rooms. With Haley, Sam, and Rafe, they'd had 3 kids who wouldn't trust one another to guard the bathroom door. They weren't going to plan an escape together. But now I was here, and Rafe and I were already whispering in corners. Time for a lockdown. I think they added an extra layer of security in my bedtime hot chocolate. Sleeping pills. Otherwise there was no way I would have zonked out so fast. My dreams came in fits and starts, as if they were being stifled by the pills. I'll admit I was glad of that. What I saw was enough images of Daniel being struck by a car, then Ash running into traffic while being pursued, then me chasing them, trying to warn them, but falling ever farther behind, unable to hear them, smell them, see them, my muscles seizing, reflexes slowing. Then some cosmic force hit the rewind button, and I was in the lake with Serena again, seeing her pulled under the water, being pulled under myself. I tried to fight my way to her, but I couldn't see her, couldn't hear her, couldn't breathe. I was drowning. Really drowning. I couldn't get up. Couldn't get free. The water was everywhere, blocking my nose, my mouth, the smell of chemical lemon, the taste of cotton lemon. Cotton? My sleeping brain was alert enough to know neither of those scents fit the scenario and started pulling me up from sleep. But it was like pushing up through the water. Something held me down, and the more I struggled, the more I choked and sputtered. I kicked and punched until my fist made contact and I heard a gasp. The water receded just enough for me to catch half a breath. It was enough. I pushed through the thick, sticky water of sleep and surfaced. My eyes opened to darkness. Something was pressed against my face, lemon-scented fabric, the smell and the cotton filling my mouth and blocking my nose and covering my eyes. A pillow. There's a pillow over my face. I tried to claw the pillow away, but someone was on my chest, holding me down. I clawed at my attacker instead, convulsing and bucking and kicking. I grabbed fabric. Dug my nails into flesh beneath. Heard another gasp. The pillow loosened just enough for a breath. When it clamped down again, I stopped blindly flailing. I wedged my hands between my chest and my attacker, pulled up my knees and heaved. My assailant flew off so fast I lay there another moment, frozen in surprise. Then I scrambled up, whipping the pillow to the floor and taking deep, shuddering breaths. I looked around. Empty. My room was empty. I was alone. Had I been imagining things? A weird waking dream from the drugs? A figure leaped from the side, a blur in my peripheral vision. Hands grabbed for me. I rolled to the side, clear off the bed, landing on my feet. I spun to my attacker, and I saw blonde hair tangled around a thin face. Nicole. She was crouched on the bed, her eyes so wide and wild they sent a chill through me. Not just crazy. Inhuman. She snarled and gnashed her teeth. Then she leaped. I swung out of the way easily. She plowed into the wall with a thump that I swore I felt, but she only recovered and came at me again. Again I dodged. Again she missed, this time stumbling and hitting the floor, then she bounced back and charged. I hit her this time. Part of me didn't want to. She wasn't a threat now, lumbering as blind and awkward as a newborn rhinoceros. And one look at her face told me that any trace of the Nicole I'd known was gone. She'd completely snapped, and as much as I hated her for what she'd done to Serena, when I looked at her now, I saw madness, not evil. But I had to stop her. So I hit her. Hard. My fist plowed into her chest. As she stumbled back, a follow-up kick knocked her to the floor. The fact that I was able to do it so easily told me I wasn't exactly fighting a worthy opponent. When Nicole went down, I pinned her. That was harder. She might not know how to throw a punch, but whatever madness infected her was pumping adrenaline through her veins. She'd been strong enough to almost suffocate me. Now she was strong enough to fight like a wild animal, writhing and bucking and hissing and biting. As I struggled to hold her down and stay away from her teeth and nails, I felt the first licks of rage. Again, it confused me at first. I wasn't truly angry, so why was my skin heating, the burn of rage building? Then the rationalization came. Thoughts, images, whispers, swirling around me. She killed Serena. Murdered your best friend. Tried to drown you twice. Almost suffocated you now. Of course you should be furious. And how had this even happened? Wasn't she supposed to be locked up? Wasn't I supposed to be locked in? And where was Kenji? My dog was gone. That couldn't be a coincidence. Someone set this up. Someone here was trying to kill me. They'd sworn to protect me. They hadn't. They didn't want to. It was up to me. Protect myself. My hands started to pulse. The room tinged with red as my blood pounded in my ears. Nicole was the enemy. To protect myself, to protect my friends, I had to eliminate the enemy. It was that simple. My hands went to her throat. My nails had thickened to claws now, and as my fingers wrapped around her throat, the claws dug in. Droplets of blood popped up, bright red against her pale skin, the smell of it filling my nostrils, filling my head. Another smell, too. The stink of fear as I squeezed her neck. She tried to fight harder. But she was already giving it everything she had, and as my body started to shift, adrenaline pumped through me, too, and I held her easily. I kept squeezing. Blood dribbled down her neck. Her eyes beady. She clawed at my hands, and I felt her nails dig in, but I just kept squeezing. You're dying, I thought. Strangling. Fighting for air that isn't there. How does it feel? Are you thinking of Serena? Wondering if this was what she felt when you drowned her? What I felt when you put the pillow over my face? Do you regret it? Nicole's hands stopped clawing mine. Her eyes closed. Her body went limp. Still I kept squeezing. She's unconscious. You can stop. She's not a threat now. No, as long as she's alive she's a threat. You're killing her, Maya. Good. It's the same thing she tried to do to me. She deserves to die. I want her. My fingers froze. I stared down at Nicole, lying beneath me, face turning blue, and I leaped off her so fast I stumbled back onto the bed. I furiously rubbed my face, the thick pads of my hands rasping against my skin. This isn't me. I'm not a killer. Of course you are. You're a cougar. A wild animal. A predator. That's what they created. That's what you are. No, I'm not. I looked down at Nicole and squeezed my hands into fists. As I did, I felt the rage subside, the shift reverse, like a tide ebbing, slow but steady. I looked around. My bedroom door was ajar. I walked over, cracked it open, looked and listened. The hall was silent. I could escape. Escape where? The house is secured. But Nicole had gotten out of her so-called secured room and into mine. We'd fought and no one had come running. No one even seemed to notice. Nicole didn't just wander into your room on her own. You know that. Someone let her in and took Kenji and probably drugged Nicole to make her flip out like that. Which meant that the trap had already sprung. I'd outwitted it and now the way was clear enough. Was I sure of that? Of course not. But the alternative was to sit on my bed and wait for someone to come and find out I'd nearly killed Nicole. I had to take a chance. 28. I slipped into the hall. I looked both ways and listened. I even inhaled, although I wasn't sure how much good that would do. There was nothing. A still and silent house. I didn't do more than glance at the stairs. Yes, that was the way out, but I wasn't running off and leaving everyone else. Rafe said his door was the third down from mine. I crept to it and tried the handle. It was locked, of course. When I twisted the knob, I heard a thump inside. Then the scratch of nails against the wood floor. Kenji, I whispered. An answering scramble as she ran to the door. She leaped up, nails raking down it as she whimpered. A sleepy grunt from inside. Then, Kenji, how'd you get in here, girl? Rave. A pause. His light footfalls hurrying to the door. Maya, he whispered through it. Something's wrong, I said. The security system seems to be down. I tried his door. Still locked? Try it from your side. He did. The knob turned but it didn't budge. He yanked at it. Still nothing. It's just yours, he said. I tried his door again, pulling harder. It's locked, Maya. If you can get out, go. Not without. Go. We're fine. I tried again, but the door wasn't opening and every second I hesitated was another second to get caught. They were fine. Not happy. Not free. But safe enough. Safer than Daniel. And weren't they all better off if I was free and looking for a way to get them out? Go, Maya. I'm fine and I'll take care of Kenji. I hesitated only another moment. Then I tiptoed to the top of the stairs. As soon as I reached it, I picked up voices below. I strained to hear what they were saying, but it was too far. I took one careful step down. If no one knew the system had malfunctioned, I might be able to get past. I caught the words Nicole and security, and stopped. The voices grew more urgent, one man whispering harshly to the other to find Nicole before anyone discovered she was missing or their asses would be on the line. I backed up and looked around. The roof. I jogged barefoot down the hall. It was only when I reached the door that I remembered Rafe had to buzz down to be allowed out. I turned the knob. It twisted, the door opening. It's a trap. Or the system is malfunctioning. What if Nast is watching me right now, rubbing his hands as he gathers evidence of how uncontrollable I am? How I need to be in a secure cell where I can't escape, can't collaborate with Rafe, can't cause any trouble. And can't be subject to any deal they'd made with Antone. I was so lost in my confusion that I didn't hear footsteps until I caught a flicker of movement and turned to see a security guard cresting the landing. He saw me and stopped dead. A split second of shock crossed his face, then both hands sailed to his belt, one grabbing his gun, the other hitting a button on his radio. The wail of a siren jolted me to life. I yanked open the door and raced up the steps. I kept my gaze fixed on the door at the top. Please be open. Please be open. Don't trap me here in this. I turned the handle and almost fell through as it opened. Behind me, the guard barked into his radio. I flew through the door and onto the roof. I blinked against the darkness. The sky was overcast, pitch black. After a moment, my night vision kicked in, fueled by lights below. When I could see, I realized why the guard wasn't racing up the stairs after me. Because there was no place for me to go. Logically, I'd already known that. In my race to escape, I hadn't stopped to be logical, though. Boots clomped up the steps. I looked around. There was nothing higher than the balance beams. I took a running leap and vaulted up. I was crouched on the beam when the door banged open. I turned to see the guard, gun raised. "There's no place to run," he said. "Just come back down." I ran along the beam. He swore and fired. The dart zoomed past me. I saw the end of the beam coming and realized there was no way I could jump onto the wall. It was too high. A second dart snagged in the folds of my shirt. As I measured the distance to the wall, the guard shouted that I was just going to hurt myself. "Halt now!" before I backed up and took a running leap. I didn't try to jump onto the wall. Too dangerous. Instead, I caught it with both hands, the stone scraping my bare forearms, shoulders wrenching before I swung my legs up and scrambled onto the wall. The guard lifted his gun. A figure shot from the doorway and knocked him aside. I saw dark hair and thought Rafe, but that hope lasted only a moment, while the two skidded across the roof. Then Antone scrambled up, gun in hand. "Are you mad or just incompetent?" he snarled at the guard, who was pushing to his feet. "You're going to shoot a tranquilizer dart at a girl on a 70-foot-high wall." I looked down, and when I did, my breath caught. As I'd seen earlier, the house was built on a mountainside, and they'd put the rooftop courtyard at the front of it, meaning I was looking down at a drop of at least 20 meters. "You can't jump that, Maya." Antone advanced on me, gun lowered. "You know you can't." I looked over at the roof. It rose steeply beyond the wall. "That won't work, either," he said. "They were very careful when they gave you this exercise yard." I looked down again. I flexed my knees. "Maya!" He lunged toward me. I staggered back and pretended to nearly lose my balance. That stopped him. "You cannot jump," he said. "You know that. At the very least, you'll break your leg. How far do you expect to get with a broken leg? Even without one, there's no place to go. Look around you." Below the wall was a driveway. Solid pavement. Beyond that, a huge yard with a steep lane running down to a massive fence that wrapped around the property. Two guards already stood at the gate, flashlights and guns in hand. I looked behind me. "There's a gate that way, too," Calvin said. Every guard, every staff member heard the alarm, and they're out there. If you jump, someone will grab you within seconds. I continued looking around, assessing, measuring. There was grass to the side. I could jump there. Trees started just beyond it. If I got to the trees, I could make my way through the wooded mountainside behind the house. A light flickered in the woods. Guards heading out. Blocking off my escape routes. Still, I should give it a shot. Yes, the chances of me making it to safety were minuscule. But minuscule was above zero, and that's how much chance I had otherwise. Daniel was out there. He was injured. Would I risk injury myself to get to him? Absolutely. I took a step sideways, toward the grass. Antone lunged forward. "No, Maya. You will hurt yourself. Badly. You know you will." He inched toward me. "Can we negotiate?" My head jerked up at that word. He locked gazes with me again. "Yes, negotiate," he said. "I think that's a possibility. Not now. Not under these circumstances. But it is a possibility." Across the roof, the guard just stood there, looking annoyed at the delay. Paying little attention to what Antone was saying, but still listening. Things need to happen for that possibility to become a reality, Antone said. Do you understand that? No, but I understood he was trying to convey a message. I will help you, Antone said. I know what you want and I will help you, Maya. He'd thought he was helping me all along. He thought having me locked up here was helping. I looked down again. He was right. It was too far. At the very least, I'd sprain my ankle and that would cost me any chance of escape if I ever had a chance at all, as the yard and forest filled with shapes and flashlight beams. I want to negotiate, I said. I know you do. But you can't under the current circumstances. He sounded as if he meant while you're standing on the roof, but he arched his brows, his look implying more. We need to change the circumstances, and I will help you do that. Okay. I hesitated. Another look down, but there was nothing to be gained here except injury and trouble. Better to show that I could be reasonable. I crouched to leap onto the roof. Antone exhaled and nodded, coming forward, hand out to help me down. I waved him off and was about to jump when the door crashed open. 2 guards barreled through, rifles rising. No. Antone said. She's the guards fired. The first dart hit me in the arm. The second hit me in the thigh. I froze, crouched there. Antone lifted his arms, trying to reach me, but the wall was too high. He said something, his words fast, eyes wide with panic as he gestured for me to jump down. Now. Before I wobbled. Antone shouted something. His voice thundered in my ears, words indistinguishable. I tensed to jump and my muscles went slack. I tried to jump, but my body wouldn't obey. Couldn't. I felt myself toppling. Falling. Then everything went dark. The rest of the audiobook will be continued in the next episode. Join us on Patreon for early access or more great audiobooks. A link is provided in the video description.